Hello, I'm Doug Applegate with Praxidine. I'm one of the co-founders of this company. We've built our Mixmate chemical blending system, and the students at DMAC, the Precision Ag class, have studied Mixmate as part of their class, and they have a list of questions for us. And so I'm going to go through these questions and answer them for the class. Is there anything on the app that you would like to improve on? Well, that's a good one because there was always improvements. That's constantly happening. In fact, we just recently released an update. With software, it's never complete. So software is always an evolving process. It's always moving along. And so, yes, there are things we would like to do. A really big one, though, is we are Android only at this point. Sometime down the road, we'd like to include iOS since that is so popular in the ag market. But that work has started, but it's quite a ways off before that will be completed. Who utilizes your system the most, co-ops or individual producers? We started primarily with individual producers. But as we have added features, we've gotten more into commercial applicators as well. And so, like, for instance, our local nutrient has a system, a couple of systems actually. We've got some other co-ops. I know there's a co-op in Michigan. We're getting into the turf market now, and we've had some inquiries from industrial markets as well. On average, how much do you think an individual producer would save per year using this system? How long would a mid-price system take to pay for itself? So there are several points to that. So a few years ago, a gentleman from AGCO shared some information with us. They have, and John Deere has this very similar information as well. But about 25% of the engine hours are spent spraying. So the nozzles are on, the engine's running fast with the nozzles on. That's about 25% of the engine hours. 28% of the engine hours are spent idling. In other words, the sprayer's sitting there with the engine running. And then the balance is turning in the field and like high idle going down the road. So in fact, I just did look at this again recently. If some of the efficiency numbers of that, a 1,200 gallon sprayer operating at, I believe it was 14 miles per hour with a 120 foot boom with 100% productivity would be about 200 acres per hour. But at a 25% rate, it's going to be spraying about 50 acres per hour. And I just took a look at this. If you could cut that idle time in half and add that to spraying time, that would be a 56% improvement in productivity. That also, let's see, they go from 26, yeah. So you would be at about where the average sprayer and adding that productivity, you would be about at the position where you could take 3 sprayers and actually do it with 2 if you could have that efficiency. Numbers wise, if it costs $150 an hour to trade or lease a sprayer, it basically would be going from $3 per acre cost down to $1.92 if you made that big of a jump. AGCO said that a 20% improvement in productivity would lower the operating costs by 80 cents per acre. So basically going from 26% field efficiency to 31%, they said that would save 80 cents per acre. So somewhere in between those numbers, 22,000 acres would pay for a very typical Mixmate system. We've got a grower over in Illinois that has really a higher end system. He farms probably in the neighborhood of 4,500 acres. He says it would be worth it to buy the system new every year if he had to. So he's getting the value of $30,000 usage of his system every year. So return on investment for many people would be in the neighborhood of a year. Number 4, how well does this product handle granular chemicals over long periods of time? We have a continuous flow feature in the inductor. So it uses the scale in the inductor to weigh chemicals. So if you're pouring a jug, it weighs it. If you're pouring dry flowables, we would have a pool of water held in the inductor, and you could pour it in, it would weigh it. But we also have a continuous mode for larger quantities of dry. So in that case, the computer uses the scale to maintain a pool of water. So let's say you put in 7 gallons of water, it would maintain that level as you pour, say, a bag of ammonium sulfate, for instance. It would be flowing water into the top of the inductor at approximately 25 gallons per minute, and it would be going out the bottom valve at that same rate, along with the dry flowable that you add. So in that mode, we are not weighing the chemical, but it is flowing through and being mixed extremely well. So we had a company come that manufactures dry flowable fertilizers that are intended to be put into solution, but some fertilizers are kind of difficult. Some may not go into solution quite as well, and some chemicals are that way. They came and we were doing some demos with it, and they said this is the best thing they've seen to handle those dry fertilizers. So that went really well. Question 5, can you have a custom setup built for a specific person? So Mixmate's very modular. You can set up virtually any way that you want. Our software is built to support all those configurations. So it might range from a very basic system that consists of some valves and a flow meter to measure bulk products, up to multiple flow meters for multiple bulk products being measured simultaneously along with the water. And then the addition of our inductor, which is being measured by weight, and even systems with multiple inductors. So typically that would look like one of our Mixmate inductors to handle the jugs in smaller quantities, and then a large inductor, say a 150 gallon tank, that the system could measure multiple bulk products through the large tank automatically or manually. So many different ways, different sizes of pumps and flow meters and all those things can be customized to match. Question 6, what is the best-selling variation of the system? Our Mixmate Fusion with a 3-input stack and water control is the most common. So that's our plastic inductor with the scale built in, and then a set of valves mounted on the side to handle 3 bulk products is the most popular. And then typically a 3-inch flow meter and valve for the water control. So it would measure the water into the mix. And price on that's about $22,000. So that's usually a question that gets asked. Does the Mixmate indicate the amount of acres that the batch will cover? Yes, it does. So you can set, basically you would set up your prescription in the software, and then as you're doing the job, you tell it how big of a batch you want. And you can tell it in the size of the batch in gallons or in acres, and gallons per acre, for instance. If it's a neat mix, in other words, 100% product, like you're blending liquid fertilizers, then you could just tell it how many gallons that you needed, or pounds in the case of a dry fertilizer blender. So yes, you can tell it acres or gallons and gallons per acre. How often should you check to see if the rinse cycle is cleaning effectively? That's something that you can see in the inductor. how quickly and well that is rinsing. And so the inductor itself, with each product, you can set the length of the rinse for each product. And that works in the inductor. It also works in the stack. One quick way of checking to see if the stack is getting cleaned well is there's a filter ahead of the gear meter, which is common on the stacks. You can pull that filter off and check and see if there's residue in the filter or not. Typically, you might see a bit of a dry flowable possibly build up a little bit in the filter, but you really want to have that cleaned out so you don't have chemical incompatibilities happening in the filter. Number 9, if we get all the data recorded on the app, what happens if there is a loss of connection while in the field? Will the data be saved? So the data is saved as you mix in the app. Actually, at the end of the mix, it's saved, or if you stop or pause the mix, it saves the data. It is saved on the tablet. Once the data is synchronized with the Intersect cloud service, then the data is saved onto the cloud as backup and also accessible from the office. And if there's a loss of connection while you're mixing, the connection is from your tablet to the Mixmate. The Mixmate goes into a pause mode and stops the blend if the connection's lost with the tablet, and likewise the tablet records what has happened up to that point. In your opinion, what's the biggest disadvantage of using the Mixmate Fusion? Oh, that's a good question. The Fusion is and our inductors are unique in the industry. We can measure directly from jugs and dry flowables, and it's fast for those things. So that's the good points. Disadvantage probably is the cost. The cost of that inductor and the technology is not insignificant. That is probably the biggest stopping point we'll have with people. So biggest disadvantage would be the cost. We've done about everything we can do to keep the cost down. Our electronics and all of our engineering that we have done have optimized the cost on the system so that we can get it out to a lower cost. And I'm a farmer as well, so I'm sensitive to that, and I understand the cost of a system. So yeah, that's probably the biggest disadvantage, and we've really worked hard to get the system cost effective for you. Questions regarding the creation of Mixmate. How did you come up with the idea of Mixmate, and how has your original version changed over time? So this whole project started clear back when Brent and Luke were in 4-H and FFA. They built a seed tender for our farm in 2005. Brent was just starting into college, and Luke was in his sophomore year of high school, I believe. And Brent built the machine part of the seed tender. In other words, the hydraulic drive, the augers, the frame. It's a gooseneck trailer that hauls 4 pro boxes of seed, and it has a scale. Luke built the computer system to utilize the scale to measure out the seed. There are electric actuated valves under each seed box, so the computer could control how much seed is being dispensed from each box. And it was to also track the inventory in each box. So that was kind of the initial form of Mixmate. Luke built all that computer and software when he was a sophomore in high school. We ended up taking that seed tender to Kinsey. Brent and Luke presented the idea to John Kinzenbaugh. It was a great experience. Mom and Dad had to stand in the corner and let the young men do the presentation, which was great. And they were very interested in producing that seed tender at the time. It just wasn't a great fit for their company. So when they looked at cost to build the machine, what their competition was, and things of that nature, perhaps it was a bit ahead of its time, but they didn't feel like it was a great fit for their company in the general market. So that's where the very beginning idea was. And then over time, in the next couple of years, the idea to do a liquid version of the system came about. And there were several prototypes that happened. Luke worked on a prototype, never got it to a running mode at the very first time around. Brent worked on it again later. Things evolved as far as electronics and software. And then I don't even remember what year, about 11 years ago, Brent got more serious about doing this. Brent had worked at Kinsey one summer as an intern, got to work right with John in his shop. It was a great experience and gained a lot of knowledge as far as starting up a business and what it was like to run your own business and things like that from John. It was a great experience. And then after college, he went on to work at Kloss and was test engineer for North America. While Brent was at Kloss, he did a great amount of instrumentation in testing. He worked a lot on control systems. So the header control in the, well, with 700 series, not quite current. That header control system, which is probably still in the current series of Combine, Brent had a big hand in making that system work. And a whole assortment of other things that you do during test. And then Luke worked at Kuhn and developed a vertical feed mixer for them. But in the meantime, after their engineering degrees and work experience, they both decided to come back to the farm and develop Mixmate, started a company around that. The first version that we did was basically around the stainless steel inductor, and all the products would go through valves in the back and be measured by weight. Well, it became obvious pretty quickly that that was not going to be fast enough. Farmers in the field needed speed. And the only way to get speed was to measure multiple products simultaneously. And the best way to do that was add flow meters to the system. The big trick was finding good flow meters. And when we found the gear meter, it's a positive displacement meter, and it doesn't have to be recalibrated for different chemicals. That's what really made it work. And so it was a kind of a factor of finding the right components, which we test all kinds of stuff to figure out what works best. And that whole combination evolved into what it is today. And so after the stainless steel version was out a couple of summers, then we added the plastic inductor, which we basically took the most needed features from the stainless inductor, and we combined it all into the fusion system so that we could have a lower cost price point for customers. It basically has just the needed functions. And then along the way, there were a couple patents. And so with the system, there's features about it that are patented. One that's most people see is the fast jug rinsing utilizing air. Auto reconciliation is patented. There's an assortment of features that are in the patents in the system. So anyway, that was kind of a long answer. Once you came up with the idea of Mixmate, how long did it take for the product to become a reality? Oh, that was a long time. So it probably, once Brent started working on it by himself initially, but it was about 7 years from the time he got serious about it to, working full time on the project, to our first machine going out the door. For a while, we had 5 people writing software for a couple of years. So there's a significant software investment in the machine. And 7 years from probably kind of getting pretty serious about building it till the first machine went out the door. What was the hardest part of creating the Mixmate? Well, that would be software. That is probably the mechanical design of it. Luke does an awesome job with design of the system. But I would say probably software development cost is probably 10 times what the mechanical design is. So to recover those costs, it's built into the price of the controllers and the price of the machine, because it's hard to sell software, but people buy machines. So we can sell the machine. The actual cost of the machine does include cost of software development. Question 4 in this section. What sort of improvements could you make or are you looking at to make? How do you see it evolving as competitors arise? Well, that kind of gets into things that we can't talk about yet either. But I'll tell you a couple things that we kind of see on the horizon, the near-term horizon. Drones are becoming a bigger part of this world, and automated mixing is, if you've got an automatic drone out in the field, automated mixing kind of goes along with that. We are won't take many very big changes to have a drone say, I want this mix, and the Mixmate would deliver it. That is not a very big step to get there. At some point we will be doing that. We've got just a little bit farther to go with our Intersect Cloud software to be able to handle that. But that would be one thing. API connections, that's a huge one, and that kind of gets us full circle on our core machine. Basically, an API connection is the interface for one computer system to talk to another one. So for instance, let's say you're an ag retailer and you have a work order system existing within your computer system, and then you typically would print a paper printout to take out to the mixing plant. What an API will do would be to electronically send that work order to the tablet associated with your Mixmate. So basically, you set up the work order in the office in your software rather than our Intersect software, and then that would transfer directly to the tablet. And likewise, when the job is completed, that data would go all the way back into the customer's software system. So an API is a big step. I'm hoping those get rolling this winter through Ag Gateway, which is kind of a standards development organization. We've worked with a number of mixing companies to develop a standard data interface for those API connections. And ourselves and several other companies, multiple other companies are just kind of on the verge of starting to implement this new standardized data. And so that will be a big step because it'll open doors quickly for data connections. So one of the big things with having that kind of data connection, basically a foundational function of Mixmate is to identify and measure products. If you load your sprayer and Mixmate identifies and measures the products that went into that tank, and you take that record and you combine it with an as-applied record of what was applied to the field, you have actual information that's recorded. So in other words, you've got accounting quality information that can be utilized in your accounting system. And since this data is collected automatically, it's going to be far more accurate than what human recorded data would be. So you could have an automated system to trace the chemicals from basically your jugs and containers, where it was used and how it was used on the farm or field. Well, let's go to the next question. Was there one or two specific problems that you ran into time and time again while creating the Mixmate system? And if so, what and how did you keep this problem from occurring when developing other Mixmate generations? We did run into a couple of things that were a recurring problem. We had, and it kind of came from components that we were purchasing. So we have run into a couple of problems with some outside components. I'm not going to name any names, but those companies have worked hard to resolve those problems. And it's something you can't find every issue on the test bench. There are just a certain number of things that are not going to show up until you put a large number of machines out in the field. And people use things in different ways. And we even had a issue this season with synchronization between our tablets and the cloud that had never come up before. And it was because of a customer was using the system in a little bit different way, and it was causing some conflicts within the synchronization process. Those have been resolved, but you never know until somebody's out using it in a different way. And since we have so many possible configurations, it's very difficult to test for all those. So our electronics have been very reliable, and those are built right here. And so we have control over that. We've had a little trouble with some outside components. Sometimes it's a matter of maybe selecting a little different component to be used in the system. We've got, basically if something fails in the field, we always want the part back so we can inspect it to see if we can figure out what the problem was. Probably the biggest problem we have ever had was with the Deutsch connectors. We started out with, they're used everywhere in agriculture. Those are a sealed connector. But what we discovered was our power usage is fairly low, and we are using the standard pins in the connector, and we were having intermittent connection problems. And we ended up sending wiring harnesses to Deutsch for them to test and inspect. They approved how we were building our harnesses. They just came back and said that we needed to use gold pins in the connectors for reliability. It's not in their documentation anywhere, but if there was less than 1 amp of current flowing, they recommended a gold pin. They never told us that. It's not in their documentation, and you don't find that out until after you've had a problem. And so we went back and we refit every system with gold pins, and it was quite a process. But that has eliminated that connector problem. If there's ever a problem, it would be maybe the connector isn't plugged in completely. So basically it needs plugged in until the connector will make the snap. How many different engineers do you have working together to help create these products? Currently we have Brent. He's our oldest son. He's the chief engineer. He works on embedded systems primarily and the app. So he writes the software. Basically, when you build a circuit board, you have to have software even for the components on the board to talk to each other. So Brent does the embedded control system. He also is the primary developer on the app now. Luke, our younger son, when he first came back to start to help, he was doing the primary app development. Luke has now gone more to managing the farm, but he does, on a rare occasion, helps with some support. And he also does all the mechanical design of the system. So any CAD work and development. He is excellent with that type of thing. We have another software engineer that's full-time, primarily works on the Intersect Cloud service. And then we have an electronics engineer that we contract hire. He also has all the circuit board assembly equipment, which is placed here on our farm in what used to be our farrowing house. So it went from a hog house to a clean room. So that was quite a change. And you would never, other than it still a little bit looks like a hog house, but you would never smell a pig there. Basically, it's a clean room. You have to go through 3 doors to even get to where the electronics assembly happens. And another room in that building is where the machines are assembled. So we have a company out of Lincoln, Nebraska that manufactures our stainless components. A company about 17 miles from here manufactures most of our wiring harnesses. Circuit boards are built here. Bare circuit boards come. I think they're manufactured in China, which virtually all circuit boards are manufactured there. The bare boards are then assembled with components with pick and place machines, and there's some hand soldering, but machines pick up those tiny little specks of parts and puts them on the board, and then they go through an oven to solder them. All of that engineering, all the software, all the electronics, all the mechanical engineering is all done right here by our team. And that's kind of unusual for a small company to tackle such a large project. So, and then we have a couple more people with production to build and track inventory of machines. And then my wife and I, I'm primarily in marketing at this point. And Kathy, when you call on the phone, she will brighten your day. She can answer virtually any question about the system and handles all that incoming calls primarily. So anyway, so there's about 7 of us full-time here working, which is a pretty big project for a small group. And there's it's taken us some time to get here, but we've got an amazing amount of things done over the years. Questions regarding inventions and business. How many setups have been sold in the USA and worldwide? We've got a couple of systems in Canada. We've got a dealer in Russia that would really like to have components, but we haven't quite gotten through all the process of making that all happen. Farms are huge in Russia and Ukraine. County-sized farms, 1 million acres, 2 million acres. A lot of huge farms there, and theft is a big issue, so they need better records. Setups sold in the USA. We're at about 100 right now. That's kind of proprietary information, but that's where we're at, about 100 systems out there right now. What other products are you thinking about building to help make farming better and more efficient? Right now, we don't have enough engineering staff to really get into other markets. If at some point, someday, perhaps if we have a great offer and we sell this company, we would probably stay with the company for a while, but there are other things we'd like to do too. So there's always a big list of things to invent. When you're the creative types, there is never a lack of something to invent. There are components that we would like to build to go with Mixmate. And that's really a factor of how much time we have for engineering. As our company grows, we'll add more engineers. And right now, it wouldn't be hard to keep 10 engineers busy full time. So I didn't quite answer that because I didn't say what components, and that's because I don't want to share those ideas just yet at this point. Okay, do you have products you have built but have no intention on selling? Actually, we do. So as Brent and Luke were growing up in 4-H, some of their practice things started out like bin fan controllers. One of the things that we use on the farm, that the very original one, probably, boy, I don't know, Brent might have been in grade school when he did this. We have a remote starter for our tractor that's on the auger at harvest time. So there is a controller with a remote, and the tractor is set up at the bin site with a big gravity wagon setting by the auger as a surge tank. So when you're approaching that setup at harvest time, you can hit the remote in the grain cart tractor. It starts up the tractor on the auger, and it idles until there's grain to auger into the bin. And once it sees that grain, it augers the grain into the bin. And in the meantime, you've dumped your load and you're headed back to the field. But it stays there and it runs that corn or beans, whatever, into the bin. And as soon as the auger starts to run empty, it idles the tractor down. Actually, there's a time setting in there when it idles the tractor down. And then it idles for another time setting and then turns the tractor off and is ready for another load. So that remote start saved a lot of getting in and out of the tractor, or somebody managing that tractor and auger. Saved a whole lot of headache. And that's been running on our farm for, 15 to 20 years now. So that was probably one of the first things that was useful on the farm. We thought about building that, but today there's so many tractors, they're CAN bus based. That gets a lot more complicated, and it gets into right to repair, and there's all kinds of dynamics about that. That's kind of a problem to take it to a commercial market. One of the other things we had to patent on is our row shutoff for the planter. We have a case planter, and the clear back when we wanted to have row shutoffs on our planter, my dad and us both bought the clutches for our planters, and we both had pretty new planters. I think ours was just a year old or two. And the clutches came, and it required some cutting and grinding and things on the planter frame. And I wasn't a very big fan of cutting up my new planter. And so we decided to, if I was going to cut it up, to go ahead and build in an idea that we had. So basically, the idea that we had was there is on our planter, inside the seed meter, we cut out the seed wall between where the seed drops down the seed tube and the seed pool, and we added a door. And basically this door, when it opens, it catches the seed after it drops off the plate, so it does not drop down the seed tube. It drops back, hits the door, and falls back into the seed pool, and it just recycles the seed. So we never stopped the seed meters on our planter. We basically just got a little plastic door with a living hinge and a little air cylinder to move that door. It's been extremely reliable. We built this thing and went to the field, and we have never changed it. And we've replaced doors in that planter like once over all the years, because basically there's a flexible spot in the plastic door for a hinge, and the flexible spot eventually cracks. But we've had this same planter for a long, long time, and probably ran 7 or 8 years on a set of doors. It's been extremely reliable. We patented the product, but electric seed meters came along after a few years, and we didn't take this to market right away. If we would have taken it to market right away, probably would have been out there. But we did not. We waited 2 or 3 years, and then we took it to a manufacturer, and they go, "Oh, we really like this idea," but it was a little late at that point. Anyhow, so that was a product that didn't go to market. That was probably the main ones. Right now we've got automated fan controls on our farm that I don't think we'll take to market. We build ours because we can, for one reason. Also cost savings. So some of the fan controls out there are rather expensive. And basically the main thing we needed was a fan that turned on and off on the grain bins automatically. Our fans are all networked. I've got an app on my phone. I'll show you here. I'll bring up the app and I can go to a bin that, let's just take this one first. Oh, they're running. So there's a little green check mark here. Tells me that the fan's running. I can go in here and I can set the temperature and humidity ranges for it. But I've also got a graph. You can see when it's been running. So it tells me the hours in the last week, month, or year. That, a little different version of the graph, that fan has been running. So I can see right now, 1, 2, 3, 4 fans are running right now. So anyway, that's a little feature that's been kind of nice. It was a low cost, but the thing is, our guys have the programming skills to build such things and the resources for it. So we've done some of that. That was a long-winded answer. Is there a piece of advice that you could give young people that are looking into starting their own company or developing a new product? What would that be? Boy, that's a tough one. If you don't try, you'll never have anything. It will never happen if you don't take the chance to start something. We started with Mixmate. That was probably a little big of a project to bite off. Big companies have not built something like this. So we tackled something that's very large. I would suggest finding something that maybe is a little smaller that wouldn't take quite so much engineering. Actually, there is a lot of things these days that can be done all software-wise. When you combine hardware with it, hardware and software, the mechatronics, there's more development time, it's more costly. But like I said, software is probably 90% of the cost of building Mixmate is software development. But software is something that if you're so inclined, is something you can work on in your spare time. And prototypes don't necessarily cost that much. It's final engineered products that get expensive. Prototype comes fast and easy. An engineered product that's ready for market is a whole different thing. There's considerable engineering. If it's something that you can work on in your spare time and bring to market, that would be awesome. We have not done the venture capital funding thing, so I can't tell you much about that other than it takes lots of record keeping and lots of work for your investor. We have funded the development of Mixmate through our own personal resources. And probably one of the things that there are probably 2 or 3 things that really cause a product to fail. One of them is running out of money. And I don't care who you are and how much money you have, you're going to run out of money. So somebody that's funded with $25 million, they use it up and it's gone. So be conservative with your funds. That's probably the main thing. Be conservative with your funds. Just know that money runs out no matter what. Another thing is having the right product. So is there a market for your product? And you got to be really honest with yourself to know if there is a real market for the product. Because as an engineer or whatever, when you have an idea, you love your idea. It's your baby. And it can kind of blind you from really realizing whether you have the right product to go to market. So also look at having the minimum viable product. So have a plan. Can I get to this minimum viable product? So a product the minimum thing that you need to do to get it to market and have value so that you can start to generate some income and then add to that later. One of the mistakes we did was overbuild on our software side because the hardware side wasn't quite ready. And so we kept developing software. We overbuilt, we spent too much money on development of software. And now some of that overdevelopment really has become irrelevant because of changes in time. So an API becomes more important rather than our software handling all aspects of the record keeping. So a few little points there. How did you start selling this? What does it take to get a new product off the ground? That marketing changes all of the time. We started selling direct. So we started actually doing trade shows before the product was ready for release. So we were out doing shows, we were talking to people, we were learning about their problems. Mixmate evolved because of that learning. But people were getting to know us before we actually started selling. So we kind of had a list of contacts. There were press releases. When you have a new product, publications will do press releases for you. That's kind of a limited resource. You can't just keep going back to that. But new products can get press releases. We have applied and received several innovation awards, which really helps get your name out there. So getting your name out there is a big thing. Social media is huge. So Facebook and YouTube, Twitter to a certain extent, are huge in the ag industry as far as getting information out there. So those kind of resources are a little more cost effective. Although print ads and other modes still need to be a part of the whole deal, but Facebook has performed really well for us in the last year. And the way things have evolved now, we're looking at that even harder. So like this video, for instance, is going on our YouTube channel so everybody can see it. And if somebody wants to sit all the way through this long video, there's good little things all the way through. What other products do you feel that farmers should be focusing on in terms of making their operations more efficient? Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot is actually just keeping your machine efficient. So don't put extra hours on your machine. So one of the things you can do that is easy, doesn't cost you anything, is shut the engine off on your tractor or your combine, because every hour costs you something. And those minutes that it's sitting there idling add up over the lifetime of the machine, and they cost you. So that's the number one thing, is shut it off. Other products. I think, we do chemical handling and mixing. There's always going to be mixing operations that happen on the farm. But I think over time, that's going to evolve to, there's going to be more organics. I think our practices of growing these crops are going to evolve to where eventually organic things are going to work on the farm. But it's not something that happens overnight. No-till and strip-till and all these things take 10, 20 years to evolve. And evolving into more of an organic market will happen. What other products? I think just keeping up with technology in general is the huge thing. So every product's not right for every farm. Mixmate's not right for everybody. It kind of depends on your resources, your people, the size of your operation. There's a fit for all kinds of technology. Just keeping up and utilizing what fits your farm, I think, is the best thing. Do you foresee this product being marketed and sold overseas? Yes. So we already have dealers in Russia and Ukraine that want to do things. We just have not completed contracts and all the details to make that happen. And it's a little bit more difficult right at the moment because travel is kind of restricted. I don't know if we could travel to Russia right now or not even. Do you expect this product to help in areas with fragile ecosystems like the Brazilian Amazon basin, who have seen massive upswings in the industrialization of their agriculture sector? Well, kind of here in the United States, the Lake Erie area, they have to track and use products properly in that area. So there are algae blooms in the Lake Erie, and they're being monitored very closely. And Mixmate is very good at recording what happened. So Mixmate does have a fit in that respect, and I do expect these to become more prominent. So one of the projects that I have worked on through Ag Gateway for a number of years is traceability. I feel it's very important to track what products and how they are used on the farm. And I eventually expect that kind of information will be used to verify quality of food products for the consumer. So right now, as chemicals and seeds are manufactured, those come through a supply chain, get to the farm. It's kind of a black hole at the farm. They get used. Everybody knows they get used, just don't know exactly how. And then when the product comes off of the field, none of that information goes along with the product. But in the case of like food crops, lettuce, for instance, or onions just came up in the last, I think it was onions, the last few days. The consumer needs to know and have a product to be traceable. So at some point in time, and I know this is happening in Australia, there is a matrix code on watermelon, for instance, in Australia. If you scan that watermelon, you can find out what farm that watermelon came from. So it's traceable all the way back to the producer. And that's a hard thing to do. And traceability is a big deal. Through Ag Gateway, we have worked on the data so that there can be some kind of standardized data to make that type of thing happen. So we foresee Mixmate will be part of that process down the road. Amazon basin, at this point, we're not really pushing towards going to South America with Mixmate. I think Australia and Eastern Europe is an easier place to get started. So that's probably, we do receive inquiries from all around the world though. So it's interesting, and we'll get to be some world travelers because of it. And it will be fun to have friends from around the world. And also I was fortunate enough to go to Agritechnica in Germany this past November. And we already are developing those contacts around the world. So it's fun. It's exciting to be doing what we're doing, kind of going back up to starting a business. It's the most fun and the hardest thing you'll ever do. So if you start up a business, which I would recommend for a lot of people, that it's a good thing to do. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, and it's the most fun thing you'll ever do. So the challenges are great when you start up a business, but you're also driven to accomplish and succeed. And I don't know if you see in the corner, but at the bottom of that sign says, "Trust in the Lord." That's a huge part of things for us around here. We're Christians, and I can't imagine doing this without my Christian faith. It helps keep me going because you have good days and you have bad days. And all of those things go together to help us be better people, to take care of our customers, and just to guide us through life. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this video. I've answered a lot of questions. I think there's 23 of them here. I've enjoyed doing the video. This was the easiest way for me to do it, was to produce a video and get it up there on YouTube. And some other people are going to benefit from seeing this. So it'll be out there. I wish you all the success, and perhaps we'll get to meet someday. Thanks.